out of the ordinary. If at any time you have a question about something, please ask, as there are likely others with the same question. I'll be guided in running town meeting by the third edition of Town Meeting Time, which is published by the Mass Moderators Association and generally recognized as the authoritative guide to running town meetings in Massachusetts. Joining me at the front of the auditorium are members of the School Board, Select Board, Finance Committee, Town Council Jay Tallerman, Town Manager Michael Herbert, Assistant Town Manager Jen Ball, Finance Director, Town Accountant Brittany Jacoponi, and I thought I saw, did I see Jim Adams down there? There he is, and Superintendent Jim Adams. With me on stage is Town Clerk Cindy Livingstone and Deputy Town Clerk Chris Sullivan. This meeting is being broadcast live and recorded for later rebroadcast on WACA-TV. Welcome to those of you watching us. When you checked in this evening, you received a yellow card. It is important that you hang on to this card, as you will not be able to vote without it. Because votes will be counted based on the display of cards, non-voters and members of the press may sit anywhere in the auditorium on the lower level. I will generally be able to determine the results of each vote by a simple show of cards. In the event I am unable to do so, we have tellers who will perform an actual vote count. Tonight's tellers will be sworn in if they're needed. Please ensure that you have turned all cell phones and other electronic devices to mute. If you must take or make a phone call during these proceedings, please leave the auditorium to do so. The warrant that was posted and from which we are working tonight constitutes a notice or warning to all voters of what we will discuss tonight. Town meeting can only take action within the scope of an article on the posted warrant. Similarly, any discussion is also limited to the scope of the articles on the posted warrant. Town meeting acts on motions. If there isn't a motion before town meeting, no action, including discussion, can take place. In order to allow for discussion, I will entertain a motion and a second for that motion after each article has been introduced and explained, but before discussion commences. Once the motion has been made and seconded, it is subject to amendments from the floor. The procedures for amending an article are listed at the back of your handbook in the section titled Selected Town Meeting Procedures. If you have a question or comment during discussion of an article, make your way to one of the two microphones and wait to be recognized. After being recognized, please state your name and address and direct all your remarks to me, the moderator. Please keep your comments brief and ensure that they relate directly to the article being discussed. If you are unable to get to one of the microphones, please raise your hand and I'll have the microphone brought to you when it's your turn to speak. To ensure that we are able to hear from the greatest number of people, each speaker will be limited to one 90-second turn at the microphone during discussion of each article. Speakers may return to the microphone for a second time once all others wishing to speak have done so, but that second turn will be limited to 1 minute. If you're responding to a question, please do so through the moderator. There should be no direct discussion between parties at town meeting. All debate is to be conducted in a respectful and courteous manner. No comments of a personal nature are to be made. Rude behavior, especially shouting, bullying, and personal attacks will not be tolerated. Anyone unwilling or unable to comply with this will be removed. I'll also ask everyone to refrain from applause and similar outbursts during discussions, the exception being when we adjourn. Tonight's announcements. Babysitting is being provided this evening until 9 p.m. by the Ashland Recreation Department. My hope is that we will be done by 9 p.m., but if we're not, children are welcome to join us in the auditorium at that point or at any time this evening. They just can't vote. Thanks to Kelly Rund and her team for making this service available. I'm hoping we can make this a regular part of town meeting going forward. The Ashland Farmers Market Outdoor Pre-Thanksgiving Market will take place this Saturday from 10 to 1 at the market's usual 125 Front Street location, and it's probably not going to warm up. This is your opportunity to stock up for Thanksgiving with produce, baked goods, prepared foods, meat, fish, and wine. I'll see everyone there. The second annual holiday stroll will take place on Saturday, December 3rd from 11 to 3. There will be pop-up booths from local vendors downtown selling their products, as well as the brick-and-mortar shops all over downtown. Between 11 and 3, you can also warm up by the fire pit, roast a marshmallow, enjoy hot cider and eggnog, and play games and create some crafts. I don't have a weather forecast for that day yet. From 1:30 to 3:30, visit with Santa at the shed. At 3:30, Santa will lead the kids to the center of town for the annual tree lighting at 4:30 before Santa gets picked up in a sleigh by the fire department for a drive around town. This event is fun for all ages, so mark your calendars now. We'll start, as we always do, with the moderator's motions. The moderator's motions are listed in your handbook on page 4. They're the same standard motions we approve each town meeting, so I'll ask to address them as a group. Do I have a motion to approve moderator motions 1, 2, 3, and 4 as printed in the handbook? All in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes, but not unanimously. On to our business for the evening. Article 1, free cash transfer, sponsored by the Town Manager and Finance Director. To see if the town will vote to transfer from free cash a sum of money to be placed in the Stabilization Fund, OPEB Trust Fund, Special Education Purpose Stabilization Account, and/or Capital Account, or pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. As you can see, the amounts are listed in the warrant. The Finance Committee recommends the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $80,000 to the Stabilization Fund, the sum of $533,325 to the OPEB Trust Fund, the sum of $994,423 to the Capital Account. And please note that is a change from what's printed in your handbook. There was a Scribner's error. The handbook say $944,423. It's supposed to be $994,423. It was just a clerical error. The sum of $250,000 to account 01123-52450, and the sum of $250,000 to account 365024447-48310, and that might be the longest account number I've ever seen. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, everybody can hear me now? Great. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you here at town meeting. Nice to see some new faces here. Looking forward to a night of good debate on these 7 articles. As the moderator mentioned, the first article is the transfer of free cash. We do this each year in accordance with our financial policies, which state that currently the way our stabilization fund is set up, what we do is each year our free cash number, we put enough into our rainy day stabilization fund to get that to 10% of the general fund balance. We appropriate 30% of the free cash towards our OPEB liability, and we appropriate 50% of the free cash towards capital and other one-time expenses. This year, that translates into $80,000 for the general stabilization or rainy day fund. That translates to $533,325 for the OPEB trust, $806,000 towards capital that was deferred from the May town meeting, $188,423 towards the restoration of the Valentine barn, $250,000 to restore the contingency account for the Mendez School, and $250,000 towards a comprehensive plan initiative sponsored by the Select Board and the Planning Board. And to that end, I would like to turn it over to Brandy Kinsman and Anna Tesmanitsky to talk briefly about the comprehensive plan.
Great, thank you, Michael. So as Michael said, Anna and I are here tonight to provide some details of the line item on the comprehensive plan and why we are asking for town meeting support tonight. So, our next slide. There we go. Okay, great. So first of all, what is a comprehensive plan? It really is a master plan that's driven by the community that is a blueprint for its future. This will drive all of our major decisions in Ashland for the next 10 to 20 years. The goal is really that this is driven by the community. Public engagement is our top priority. We want to put together a plan that really reflects your plan for Ashland. It will be inclusive of all major aspects of the town. It's clear and actionable, areas like housing, economic development, transportation, and we will also be adding some additional elements including education, sustainability, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So why are we looking to do a comprehensive plan now? The last comprehensive plan that Ashland adopted was in 2003, and as we all know, Ashland has experienced tremendous growth since then. In the spring, the Planning Board had come to the Select Board with a proposal to do a comprehensive plan and a request for some funding. So the Select Board and the Planning Board are working in partnership in this project on the whole comprehensive plan. This will also coincide with a potential 2-year building moratorium for multifamilies, which we will be talking about in Article 7 tonight. So it aligns really nicely with with the comprehensive plan timeline. So our request from town meeting is the $250,000, and that funding will be used to hire an experienced consultant to work with our committee and our staff. And I'll turn it over to Anna to talk through the process and the timeline.
Thank you. So very briefly, when we ask for $250,000,
Anna, if
obviously-
you want to turn that microphone
Sure.
around so you can look at
Absolutely. So obviously, when we're asking the town for support for $250,000, you want to know how we're going to succeed. And it is the conclusion of the select board and the planning board that a timeline, deadlines, are going to be an important element of how we're going to make this work. So outside of this room, you'll see there is a one-page outline of a timeline that describes in great detail, step by step, how this will be accomplished. Essentially, it's a 2-year process. Year 1 is the data-driven year, when all of our community, and hopefully everyone in this room, will be part of a data-driven year of gathering information about the needs of our community. And then the second year is focused on the writing, making sure that we actually prepare a document that lives with us and that doesn't just kind of sit on a desk somewhere not paid attention to, but rather becomes a plan we can actually implement. So if you have any questions about the timeline, I'm more than happy to answer them after, and I'll be outside if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town vote to transfer from free cash the following: the sum of $80,000 to the stabilization fund, the sum of $533,325 to the OPEB trust fund, the sum of $994,423 to the capital account, the sum of $250,000 to account 01123-52450, and the sum of $250,000 to account 365-02447-48310, as shown in your handbooks. Do I have such a motion? Discussion. Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. This will require a simple majority. We'll start with, I'm sorry. It's on.
I'm Florida from 27 Rusty Lane. Quick question for the comprehensive plan. Do you plan to come back to us and tell us what the result of that study is and what is the actual expenses that you incurred as a result of this comprehensive plan?
Michael, do you answer? Brandy, Anna, doesn't matter. Ms. Kinsman.
So, yes, we will be coming back to town meeting to present the comprehensive plan. It will be a public process to present parts of the plan, and the public is invited to be a part of that as well. We will be having public forums and things like that. At the end of the process, both the select board and the planning board will vote to adopt the plan, and then we will bring it back to town meeting probably in November 2024, possibly spring 2025, depending on the final timing. The $250,000 is sort of a max cap. We haven't gone out to bid at all for a consultant, so that number was the sort of the not to exceed budget that we are working for. So, but yes, we will report back on that.
Since there's nobody else in line, you may.
Right. So,
If you get closer to the microphone so we can hear you.
sure. So in our language, in the business, is this what you call in government the strategic plan for the town?
Yes.
It is similar to a strategic plan.
Okay.
That was the question asked. And just a note going forward, if that happens again where I'm about to start a vote and someone has, just shout out, because I may not have seen you, so apologies for that. If there's no further discussion, we'll move on to a vote which will require a simple majority. Vote by way of your card. All those in favor of your cards. Article 1, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes unanimously. Article 2, property tax exemption sponsored by the Select Board. See if the town will vote to adjust the exemption amount and eligibility factors for the property tax exemption for senior citizens under Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 41C and a half, to be effective for exemptions granted for any fiscal year beginning July 1, 2022, or pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends that the property tax exemption percentage be set at 11.25% as recommended by the Board of Assessors. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening, town meeting participants. Chapter 41C.5 refers to a clause in Mass General Law that provides property tax relief for qualifying seniors. Ashland adopted 41C.5 in 2008. The program is based on income, and currently there are 138 senior households that have qualified for 41C.5, and based on the 11.25 exemption percentage, will benefit from an $890 exemption amount. Chapter 41C.5 is one of a number of tax relief programs that are available to residents, including numerous veterans exemptions. For information about any of these available programs, reach out to the assessor's office. Each year, town meeting is required to authorize and accept the property tax exemption percentage. The Select Board asks that town meeting support this important program and vote to approve Article 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town vote to adjust the exemption amount and eligibility factors for the property tax exemption for senior citizens under Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 41C.5, to 11.25% to be effective for exemptions granted the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2022. Do I have such a motion? Discussion. Mr. DeSoni.
Thank you. And good evening. Mark DeSoni, 49 Hawthorne Road. It's going to be quick and painless on my side, but I'm going to ask it. On this article, who is not accepted for this? That's my question.
Who is not, what, Mark? Accepted?
Who's not accepted for this?
Who's not accepted for it?
There are people who are, but there are also a category of people who are not. Who are the people who are not?
We're not going to get into the eligibility criteria for this here
This is what
evening.
this is.
Right, we're not talking about the eligibility criteria. They are what they are.
Okay, then who are the ones that will be benefiting from this?
So, in general, Mr. Herbert, please.
So Mark, you need to be 65 or older, and you also need to be. Can't hear me?
Okay, now you can.
Is this better?
Yep.
Okay. Mark, your income limit is $62,000.
And anybody that's not there has to get other way of doing it. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Moderator.
Seeing no further discussion, this will require a simple majority. All those in favor, please raise your yellow cards. Thank you, and opposed. That passes unanimously. Article 3, amend bylaw demolition delay sponsored by the Historical Commission. To see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 125 demolition delay bylaw of the Town of Ashland General Bylaws as written in your handbooks. I am not going to read it. You can all exhale now. The Finance Committee defers its recommendation to town meeting. For further discussion, Helen Nicole of the Historical Commission.
Hi, Helen Nicole, Ashland Historical Commissioner. I'm here to give you the details of Warrant Article 3, updates and changes to the demolition delay bylaw. This warrant article is sponsored by the Ashland Historical Commission. We made a number of changes to some to specifically clarify language that was already in the bylaw and some to change or add to the current language. I'm going to be going through this very quickly, so if you'd like to follow along in your copy of the warrant article, that would help. The first change that we made was to section 125.1, intent and purpose, and the new language reads, the intent of the bylaw is not to necessarily to permanently prevent demolition, but rather to provide an opportunity to develop preservation solutions and to allow time to explore economic opportunities which may allow for preservation for properties threatened with demolition. The bylaw is intended to encourage owners to seek out persons who may be willing to purchase, preserve, rehabilitate, or restore such buildings rather than to demolish them, and limit the detrimental effect of demolition on the historical architectural resources of the town. This section was changed to reflect the intention of this section more clearly. The next changes are in section 125, procedure. This is a long section, and we made a lot of changes. Most are simple wording clarifications, such as changing working days to business days, as well as in calendar days, and changing advised to written notification. Those are small clarifications. Other changes in the section include the changing of the date of January 1st, 1940 being the date required for any building application for demolition delay to any building that is 70 years or more old. This change is in line with many other demolition delay bylaws in other cities and towns, and is also a self-updating change that doesn't require any updates. The next change is the required number of days for the Historical Commission to make historical determinations of buildings from 20 to 25 days, also changing the number of days required to hold a hearing to determine if there will be demolition delay period for a building from 20 to 25 days. This allows a more adequate amount of time for the Historical Commission to get the needed information and hold these hearings and determinations in line with the once-a-month Historical Commission meetings. Another clarification in this section is an add-on that reads, the applicant shall provide any relevant architectural plans, elevations, site plans, photographs, or materials to assist the commission and make its required determinations. This is, again, just to clarify what is required. The last change in this section is a change that adds much-needed clarification to what an applicant is required to do to satisfy the requirement of the already existing demolition delay bylaw to prove that the applicant has made continuing bona fide and reasonable efforts to locate a purchaser, to preserve, rehabilitate, or restore the subject building, and that such efforts have been successful. It reads, for further clarity, continuing bona fide and reasonable effort shall be to provide the Historic Commission with a list of efforts the applicant intends to make to fulfill this requirement within 30 days of being issued a determination of 12-month demolition delay due to preferentially preserved status. This list should include preferably 5 separate planned attempts and must satisfy no less than 3 separate planned attempts to show the applicant is looking for someone to purchase, preserve, rehabilitate, or restore such building. The applicant will also be required to provide 2 written updates, one at 4 months, one at 8 months, to the Historic Commission, showing the status of the reasonable efforts being fulfilled prior to the end of the 12-month demolition delay period. The next change is in section 125.5, enforcements and remedies, and this is to change the amount of time that an applicant for a building permit that has already demolished a historical building in violation of the bylaw would not be issued a building permit for a period of 3 years instead of the current 2 years. The last change is another clarification, and it's in section 125.9, definitions, and it states business days shall mean all calendar days, Monday to Thursday, excluding all state and federal holidays. These changes have all been previously presented to some of the town boards to gain feedback and to reflect what we think is the best way to approach these updates with input from those boards. Thank you, and please vote yes on warrant article number 3. I hope I did that quickly. I really tried.
Thank you. And if you didn't catch any of that, your handbook is notated with cross-outs and bold and underlined to reflect the removals and the additions. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town amend the town bylaws, chapter 125, demolition delay bylaw for historically or architecturally significant buildings as presented in Article 3. Do I have such a motion? Discussion.
Preston Crow, 41 Rockwood. Overall, I really like this. I think it's much clearer than the last time this was before town meeting and didn't end out going forward. I think this is ready to go. The only question I have is with the definition of business days being Monday to Thursday, which I believe makes sense with town hall closed on Fridays, but all the places where it has a time limit in business days are multiples of 5, which implies weeks to me. I'm wondering if there was a disconnect there or if that's intentional. And if it's not intentional, then I would think that we should change it to Monday through Friday for the time period. And I'm wondering if the proponent could speak to that.
Who would like to respond to that?
So that change actually was one of the ones we received as feedback from town council. They were the one that put that in as the number of business days. So that's how we arrived at that, and I thought it was good because Town Hall is closed on Friday, so it's hard to do business on Friday in Ashland, and also because the Historic Commission meets once a month, making it, a really nice kind of time frame for them to be able, it's hard to gather a lot of information, and there has to be, the hearing to determine the historic, I just went right out of my head, the historic nature of the property, and then another hearing to decide whether it gets a delay by law or not. So I thought it really gave a nice adequate amount of time for the Historic Commission to be able to do the research and to be able to hold the 2 meetings.
Thank you.
That's good.
Mr. DeSoni.
Thank you. Again, Dr. Sony. All right. On the first paragraph, on page 5 of the warrant, it says after the cross-outs and after the intent of bylaw, underneath all that bold lettering, in regular letters, it achieves these purposes to the Ashland Historical Commission, is authorized to advise the inspector. Through what other departments would that be going through for verification purposes?
Verification of what, Mark?
When this historical demolition has the authority for the 70-day period, or more years, 70 or more years, how would the permits be notified through inspectors to verify that that's what it is?
Right here in the existing language, the Historical Commission is authorized to advise the Inspector of Buildings.
Yeah, how would the Historical Society get to the inspector if they can't get to it in a timely manner?
Then it goes to, should I answer that? So Mark,
Yes.
that would go, so that's what the 25-day hearings were about. So that gives the Historic Commission time to make those determinations. If they don't or they can't, within that time frame, it would get kicked back to the building inspector, and the building inspector would issue a demolition permit. Or not, but most likely it would. And that's how that would come about.
And for the sake of time, I'll erase my 22 seconds.
Hi.
Hi, I'm again Florida from 27 Rassy Lane. I just want to say thank you, Nicole. This is a very good, I think, language that you put together. And thank you for the support of everybody around here. And let's vote yes for this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, we will move on to a vote. This will require a simple majority. All those in favor, please raise your yellow cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes, but not unanimously. Article 4, accept gift parcel 0 Nancy Drive, Elliott Street, sponsored by the Select Board. To see if the town will vote to purchase, take, accept as a gift, or otherwise acquire the land located at 0 Nancy Drive, Ashland, Massachusetts, for the purpose of accessing the park that will be constructed at the former site of Cadillac Paint, or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends the town so vote. Ms. Greaves.
It's not. He's turning it on now that he knows who's talking. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is a very straightforward article, and basically is the town of Ashland willing to accept the gift of a land to give access to this new park being created at the old Cadillac Paint site. But before we get to that, I think some thanks are in order. The first is to Ed Hart, who has been working tirelessly to get this park created, and who also worked with Bob Schiavi, who is the landowner, to work with him to be willing to gift us this property. It's been a long road to get this park created. Accepting this gift will enhance the access for all to this park that's getting created. So please support this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Greaves. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town accept as a gift or otherwise acquire the land located at 0 Nancy Drive, Ashland, Massachusetts, and as shown on the Town of Ashland Assessor's Map 26, Lot 162, including 4,561 square feet, more or less, for the purposes of the accessing the park that will be constructed at the former site of Cadillac Paint to be under the care, custody, and control of the Select Board, and to authorize the Select Board to negotiate and execute any and all documents necessary to effectuate the same. Do I have such a motion? Discussion.
Bart Brinkman, 789 Myrtle Street. Just a quick question. It sounds like this is likely to be a gift, so I'm wondering about the language otherwise acquire, and if that would cover purchase and what the limits would be on that. And it's just a question about that.
Do you know any lawyers?
No, I play one on TV.
Okay, well then, you know why this is legal language.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's just
Yep,
why I was asking.
absolutely, it's standard legal language.
Okay.
And I'm sure town council would disagree with me if that were the case. See no further discussion. This will require, it's a gift, so it will require a 2/3 majority. All those in favor, please raise your yellow cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes unanimously. Article 5, adopt provision from the Brave Act, sponsored by the Select Board. To see if the town will accept the provisions of the Brave Act or pass any vote or take any other action relative thereto, the Finance Committee recommends the town so vote. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Not too long ago, the town adopted the Brave Act, which provides tax exemptions for qualifying veterans. What it left out at that point in time was the fact that any homes that were in trust were not, would not be qualified for this exemption. So what this does is it removes that restriction. So if a home is in a trust, and again, it's a qualifying veteran, they would qualify for this tax exemption. Right now, we know of one that would be eligible for that.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 22nd G. Do I have such a motion? Discussion. Mr. DeSoni.
Yep, thank you. And I thank the moderator for introducing, I thank the town manager for listening to taking off the trust part. I wanted to just ask the question of what type of veterans, what the type of the veterans are responsible, wars or service, what veterans will be included for this?
Mr. Herbert.
So Mark, a veteran is classified as anyone who served in the military and received anything other than a dishonorable discharge.
And how far back military does it go?
Yeah, so it's not just for current veterans, it's for past veterans as well.
Far back as World War II, Korean and all?
If you're alive and you served and you were discharged other than dishonorably, you qualify.
Again, taking the trust part off. I got a father that was a veteran in World War II. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, my name's David Ivancha, live at 32 Warren Road. If someone has a trust set up and that person passes away, does that tax exemption still exist for the trust itself?
Mr. Herbert.
That is a good question. No, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, this will require a simple majority. All those in favor, please raise your yellow cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes unanimously. Article 6, fund improvements to the middle school ball fields sponsored by the Community Preservation Committee. Excuse me, to see if the town will vote to appropriate $185,000 in Community Preservation Act funds to fund improvements at middle school fields to include the replacement of the scoreboards, dugouts, benches, and install batting cages for baseball and softball, or pass any vote or take any action relative thereto. The Finance Committee recommends the town so vote, and the Community Preservation Committee recommends the town so vote. Mr. Ladd.
Thank you, Town of Ashland. I'm a visual person, so I wanted to put up visualizations of the current scoreboards. Go to the next slide. The next image. So obviously, they need repair, and it's a repair of new dugouts, new scoreboards, everything at the middle school fields. This has probably been long overdue. Great partners from the athletic department and DPW putting together a great proposal, upgrading things there. So I know there's a chair over there that says official score, but nobody's sitting there. So hopefully the middle school programs can have a great program there. These are open for the entire community. Should be a great investment in the middle school fields. So I hope for your support there.
When Mr. Ladd sent me this presentation the other day, I jokingly said, just show the first slide, the second slide, and say, move the question, and you'll be fine. Yeah. Any further discussion? This requires simple majority. All those in favor, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one quick question, Cara Rossi. Is David Hunt's name going to be taken off the sign?
Is David Hunt's name going to be taken off the sign?
All I can say, am I on? Yeah. Is we have a policy, school committee has a policy regarding the naming of fields. We'd have to review, and any signage, et cetera, we'd have to review that at the time. So I don't think we've considered that request at all.
Arguably one of the most winningest coaches in Ashland High School history. One of his players. Just wouldn't want to see that. Thank you.
It's a great comment. I do hope we take the Coca-Cola advertisement off, though. That probably makes a lot more sense. But yes, I do hope we acknowledge the naming rights. The Walker Field has some details to it as well, but we'll keep those up to date.
Mr. DeSoni?
Yep, thank you, Mr. DeSoni, Mark DeSoni. Those signs have been around since, late 60s or 70s. The Dave Hunt sign came right around in the middle 70s. Just as long as the growth has been around too. I would think Mr. Laff would take the initiative to change it, and I agree with our police chief that the Dave Hunt should still be there, but the one that's in the baseball field, which is what the one is on the left is, that is definitely a relic that should be gone. But to understand reasons, but not understand recent times, think back historically what the sports meant back in the 70s, is to keep it as is, but update the fields, but remember what made those fields famous and what teams were there. What teams were there and the ones going forward wouldn't have been there because of the past, Dave Hunt and all the coaches in the past to make Ashland Clockers. Thank you.
I have not lived here since the 60s or 70s. I imagine that those who have a sentiment one way or the other about the names in the fields. I just want to point out to us this evening that the retention or changing of the names on the field are not within the purview of town meeting. So I'd ask that we avoid further discussion of it.
That's fine. Carl Hackinson, 346 Chestnut Street. I have a question for the presenter. You said that the fields were the softball and baseball fields. Is the football field being changed as well? Because the football field is Walker Field and the softball field is Hunt Field. So whatever is being changed should be consistent with what's there now.
So the proposal is to the proposal is to replace the scoreboards for the entire middle school area. So there's a baseball field, a softball field, a turf field. There are dugouts for softball and baseball to replace those, to add dugouts for middle school baseball and softball. So yes, I said baseball and softball, but it also includes the sign that is technically on top of the middle school that is appropriated for the turf field, soccer, football, lacrosse, whatever it's used for, everything. And some of the proposal includes some electrical work to make sure the signs are updated to code and all kinds of things like that. So it's a comprehensive list working with the DPW to get all of those included in the $185,000 upset limit.
Anything further? If not, we'll move to a vote. This will require a simple majority. All those in favor of Article 6, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? That passes, but not unanimously. Article 7, temporary multi-dwelling building moratorium sponsored by the town manager and select board. To see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Ashland zoning bylaw, Chapter 282, by deleting Section 9.7 as the section has expired, and in its place add the section printed in your handbooks. The Finance Committee recommends the town amend the Town of Ashland zoning bylaw, Chapter 282, as set forth in the warrant in Article 7. The Finance Committee believes that a pause in multifamily development would enable the town to complete the long-range comprehensive plan, the development of which is funded in Article 1, to more clearly calculate the fiscal impact of future multifamily development on town finances. The Finance Committee also notes the town has relied on new growth to sustain its annual budgets, and a lack of new growth from this moratorium in future years may require the town to raise revenue through other methods. Mr. Herbert.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm just going to go through this presentation that I had presented to the Planning Board originally, but I will shorten it up as much as I can. Again, this is a proposed multifamily building moratorium. This was an article proposed by me to the Select Board at one of our October meetings. The Select Board voted to support the article and place it on the warrant during that same meeting. Also, the Planning Board held a hearing on November 10th and voted a positive recommendation. Tonight's presentation will talk about what a building moratorium is, why we would want a building moratorium, and data that we are currently looking at, and some of the things that we will look at during the comprehensive plan process that we talked about in Article 1. So what is a building moratorium? Well, the building moratorium that's being proposed is a 2-year pause on issuing building permits for multifamily buildings, which are defined as apartments and condo units, currently defined as 3 units or more on a single lot. So I said this was a 2-year moratorium. We cannot have an unlimited time period for a moratorium, so we have to define that. It's similar to a sewer moratorium that has been put on before, but it's broader. So there are some projects that wouldn't necessarily require a sewer hookup. They would be able to do their own wastewater treatment facility on site or septic. So those buildings, those projects would not be subject to the sewer moratorium, but they would be subject to this broader building moratorium. And legally, we can't apply this to projects that have submitted a complete special permit application before tonight's date, November 16th. However, projects that have applied after September 16th are still subject to the sewer moratorium that we imposed back in September. So we have a sewer moratorium in place right now since September, and we're proposing a building moratorium now. So you may ask, why would we want to have a building moratorium? So we've seen a significant increase in housing units over the last couple of decades. We'll just go here. So we've seen, since 2004, we have increased housing units by 1,363 units. Between 2010 and 2020, 802 of those units were multifamily units. Again, they were apartments or condo units. And this does not include the units that are currently before the Planning Board right now, which include 100 Chestnut Street, which I believe is 174 units, 501 Pond Street, which is 120 units, and 10 to 60 Main Street, which is 200 units currently. Now, there is a project that's before the planning board that would not be subject to the building moratorium, but would be subject to the sewer moratorium, and that's the Shaw's Plaza project, and I believe that's coming in at 120 units. So this moratorium would also give us time to get more information on the impacts of development to our infrastructure, our schools, services, and finances. It gives us an opportunity to look at development patterns and our reliance on new growth revenue to sustain the budget. Now, that's not a judgment, that philosophy of relying on new growth to sustain the budget, that's not a good or bad or a right or wrong thing. It's just something that we have historically, a philosophy that we have historically espoused. And probably more importantly, this coincides with our initiative to create a comprehensive plan for the committee, or for the community, I should say. We have tried to enact some actions that would slow housing development, primarily property purchases and also policy changes. So Warren Woods the purchase of Warren Woods, which was initiated by citizens, happened between the 2010 and 2012 years before, that process took a while. But we've also purchased property. Town government has initiated these projects. Town meeting has voted for them and approved them. Those include purchases like the Girl Scout property at 20 acres, the Niccolo property at 35 acres, the Valentine property, which in total preserved 23 acres and stopped 120 unit development. The purchase of the RTD land at 150 acres, Zero Tri Street, which was 9 acres, and stopped a 50 unit 40B development, and also the public safety building taking. And we've also instituted policy changes that were, again, voted on by town meeting. The first of which was a rated development bylaw, which allowed only 25% of development to be built in each year. And then we also, earlier this year, enacted the sewer moratorium, which I talked about. So one of the things we want to use this opportunity to do is, in this pause, is to look at different data points. So one of those is school enrollment and how this growth has affected our schools. So this is data taken from the census and DOR, and then also the Department of Education. So you can see back in 2004, we had 2,590 students enrolled, and that has grown to 2,870 units over that period. So about a 300 student increase. Another thing that we want to look at is water and sewer, because there are a lot of concerns with these developments. How does that impact our water system? I mean, we can't get out from under water bans right now, and then also how's the impact on our sewer system, because we are enacting a sewer moratorium. This was interesting. So when you looked at the unit count and compared that to the water usage, we actually see a decrease in water usage from 1.85 million gallons a day in 2008 to 1.63 million gallons per day in 2021. And then our sewer usage increased slightly from 1.24 million gallons a day to 1.27 million gallons a day. So obviously there's, with the water, it looks like an inverse correlation between the unit counts and the water usage. And you could say potentially the same thing with sewer. And then another thing that we would like to look at is how these developments affect our revenue streams and our new growth revenue. And new growth is the additional taxes that are paid by these developments over and above what you pay in your taxes. And so you've seen that the yellow line is the new growth revenue that we've received, and the blue columns are the difference, the added units on each year. So it goes from 137 units were added in 2005 to about 450 units added in 2018. And you can see how that affects our new growth. So it goes, when we have periods of less growth, we have less new growth revenue. When we have periods of high growth, we have high new growth revenue. Other subjects that we would like to explore, this is not limited just to these, but just some that immediately come to mind, are police calls for service, fire medical calls for service, traffic information, and financial data such as our revenues and expenditures. I just want to impress upon everybody, this is not a permanent ban on building. This is a 2-year pause that allows us to get a handle on our development patterns and the impacts of our development. And I think it's something that's very necessary for us, especially as we're undergoing this comprehensive plan, to allow us to chart really a course for the next 10 to 20 years. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. To allow discussion, I'll entertain a motion that the town amend the Town of Ashland zoning bylaw, Chapter 282, as set forth in the warrant in Article 7. Do I have such a motion? So moved. Discussion. Okay, seeing none. It was a joke. Ms. Greaves.
Yolanda Greaves, 127 Prospect Street. I would actually like to put forward a substitute motion. I know there was discussion that as a select board we thought we were going to do this, but there was no appetite at this point, and we couldn't come to agreement as to what it would look like. So my language would be under 9.7.2, for any new, a moratorium shall apply to multifamily housing which concludes 20 units or more on one or more lots.
I'm not going to accept that right now. I will accept it, but I'd like to hear the rest of the discussion.
Okay.
Then we'll accept it.
Okay.
And I'm not going to ask you to bring that over here. I'd ask someone else to bring that over here, so you don't have to make that walk.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Tessa Vanell. I live on Leland Farm Road, and I missed, can you clarify what this means for the Shaw's development?
Could you repeat that, Tessa?
What it
I'm
means for
sorry.
the Shaw's development, I believe she
What
said.
it means for the Shaw. So again, this building moratorium does not impact the Shaw's development because the Shaw's development submitted a complete special permit application before tonight. But the Shaw's application did come in after the sewer moratorium was put on, so they are subjected to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anna?
Anna Tesmanitsky, 4 Meeting House Path, Ashland. Although I'm a planning board member, I'll speak now as a resident only. And what I'll say is I know there's a lot of strong feelings in our community, both ways, about how the town is changing, whether it's wanting to see more housing, more affordable housing, more multifamily housing, or community voices that are on the other side, if you will, concerned about what that means for other elements of our community. And what I'll say is somebody who's lived in Ashland for a long time, I attended Ashland High School in the 90s and left the community after I graduated high school and then came back here so that my daughter could go here to high school. I can say that all of those voices are really important, and I would encourage everybody in this room, whatever way you feel, to be very involved in the next few years as we as a community start to plan and shift our focus towards planning. So all of these strong voices really don't have a lot of significance unless we get more involved. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Ivancho, again, 32 Warren Road. I guess seeing the presentation you guys just put out there, you're talking about stresses on the infrastructure. I could see it in the school, but I didn't quite see it in the water and sewer data. It didn't seem like there was as much stress there. I guess to react to the stress on the school, have we looked at other ways to expand our ability to take on more students versus stopping development?
Mr.
Well,
Herbert?
I would say with the schools, I mean, Superintendent Adams or the school committee members would probably be much more better equipped to answer that. But I can tell you, just sitting from my seat, I observe them all the time, constantly trying to handle the growth. We've had to get modulars at the Warren School. It depends on where the bump in the class sizes are. If it's spread out evenly, the growth is spread out evenly amongst the K through 12 grades, or is it like a bubble going through certain grades? But I don't know if the superintendent or school committee member would want to address that further.
Briefly, because that's not really something we need to delve into at this point. We can't really get into that. But Mr. Adams or a member of the school committee can speak briefly to it.
Sure. I'd ask you to clarify your question. partly because of how you're asking us how we might handle the influx of students.
It's not so much handle the influx of students. It's more, have we looked at ways of expanding our ability to take on more students in terms of facilities?
So we have, and obviously that's why one of the reasons we're building the new David Mendez School was partly because of growth, but also the building was in such disarray and disrepair that we could no longer have students there. We've added modular classrooms, as Michael just said, to the Henry Warren School. We have moved offices around to accommodate the middle school, which is still growing significantly. In the high school here, we're not at capacity yet. But my concern is, as we look at the numbers, we're up 13% over the last 10 years. There's still an anticipated growth of another 4 to 5% of students over the next 10 years. So we're going to have to really be thoughtful about how many students are coming through, and about 27% are coming from multifamily and complexes that exist in the town of Ashland already.
And sorry, to follow up on that, I guess I'm not familiar with the timeline, but are we as a town eligible to go to the MSBA for additional school funding?
We are, but I would tell you that there are many school districts and towns ahead of us right now. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mrs. Graves is getting at what my what-if question is going to have. It said 3 units or above. Does that include an existing 3-unit apartment building to get renovated? So there's an existing 3-unit house. Under what I read, they can't rehab it. Could you clarify that, and then maybe have a follow-up?
Mr. Herbert. Town council.
So it depends on kind of what that renovation looks like in the process that it would be achieved. If it affects the underlying, say, special permit, it would be an amendment potentially to an existing special permit, so I don't think that would be characterized as a new development. If it's adding units, then that's certainly a different thing. It would likely fall under this in some respects. And if it's just an interior renovation of some kind that doesn't involve an expansion or a change to the conditions under a special permit that may have granted it, that is just a building permit issue and likely wouldn't invoke this at all.
So to clarify, it's not a building moratorium, it's a special permit moratorium.
No, well, it is a building permit moratorium, that's how we get at it. But when you need to change something or renovate something, if it's invoking kind of, because it's capturing special permits as well, because this is done through zoning. So if you're not invoking a zoning process, then this bylaw isn't affected. If it's just as to an existing building that is just going through a regular renovation, interior renovation of some kind without changing the overall unit count or any other conditioned element of that project, then this isn't going to be invoked.
Okay. I only raise that because I live on a street that currently has a vacant 40-unit apartment building that is going to get renovated, and I don't want Ashland to stop those empty apartment building renovations. Make it clear that this is on new units. All the discussion was we don't want to add growth. We don't want to add growth. Make it very clear that we're not trying to stop people from renovating existing units. So if they have a triplex, they have a quadplex, they can renovate it, make it better, make it improved, but we're not trying to stop that from happening. It makes it sound like we're not allowing any multifamily renovation or project. It's more new units, and that's confusing. I don't know if the wording needs to explain that, but I'm literally next to a building where that's just about to happen. So I don't want a vacant house for 2 years next to my house.
Ms. Kendall.
Tricia Kendall, 6 Rubenecker Road. Oh my gosh, oh, there we go. Just as kind of an official report to confirm what Michael Herbert had said earlier. On November 10th, the Planning Board held a public forum to discuss the proposed housing moratorium. and I'll note that I am the current chair of the planning board, for those who don't know me. After hearing comments from the public and a discussion by the planning board of its advantages and disadvantages, the board did vote 5-0 to support the housing moratorium as stated by Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kendall. Mr. Zoni?
And thank you, Michael Sony, one more time. Okay. First of all, thanking for the moratorium should pass. If the people can really understand that when this new high school was being built, education-wise, they were looking at school enrollments in the future, 10 years each down the road. Now, for this moratorium coming now, it's not controlling who can, who can't. It's just almost like lightly regulating of who can be, what can be done, and when it can be done, and for a timely manner. So I would pass this moratorium, but look at it as what can happen 10 more years after the moratorium time is done. And if I could be almost like the council, I could be mentoring too. So I'm thanking the moratorium for being here, but I know that I asked a question a couple meetings ago about mixed residentials. That's why I would look at the moratorium, how can it help the mixed residential and commercial when its moratorium's off and it's passed, and the time, 2 years is away. And it's not making people do renovations and stuff like that, or holding up for that. It's just, let's just take it easy, slow it down, let the town grow in its own time, and then we can come back to the bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well timed, Mr. Tassoni.
Your timing is perfect. Hi, it's me again, Florida from Rusty Lane. I do support the proposal of the town manager as written, no amendments. I only have one quick question. When we say lot, one lot, what's the size of the lot that we're referring to?
What is the size of a lot?
Yeah, there's no restriction on the size of the lot. This would apply to a lot that was.
So if I have 100 acres, not that I have one, I could not build.
If you had 100 acres here, you'd be a very rich person.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
All right, thank you.
All right. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the substitute motion, and I want to make sure I have this right. So we have a substitute motion that's been submitted. It would change section 9.72. Towards the end, it right now reads, for any new multifamily dwelling project or any mixed-use project which includes multifamily dwellings, all is defined herein on any one or more lots in any district by right or by special permit. That's what it reads currently. The substitute motion would change that. For any new multifamily dwelling project or any mixed-use project which includes multifamily dwellings of 20 units or more on any one or more lots in any district by right or by special permit. Did I get that right? Okay, that's a substitute motion. I have a substitute motion made. Is there a second on the substitute motion? There's a second. The way we handle this, because it's been a little while, is we will open the substitute motion for discussion. We will eventually vote on the substitute motion. If the substitute motion passes, we will then vote on the main article, which is now modified to include the substitute motion. If the substitute motion fails, we will move on to immediately vote on the original article that's in the warrant. Discussion on the substitute motion. Ms. Greaves.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The moratorium was brought up for our community because we had 3 or 4 large apartment complexes coming in, and this moratorium was said, okay, we need to stop that growth and we need to take a look at what our town is doing. I agree with that. But as we started looking at this further, we realized that some of the infill development that we want to see in places like downtown and Route 126 would also be stopped. If someone owns a piece of land where they have a single family, but they're in an area with a lot of multifamily units, For 2 years, they would not be able to do anything. They would have to keep that single family. That's why I'll admit, one of the developers who works here, who lives here in town, who is a big supporter, came to me on this. And part of my job as an elected official is to get all the information out. And I think that we did what we initially thought was correct by putting in this moratorium for 2 units, for 3 units or more. But in reviewing it and in getting more feedback from people, I feel that 20 units would be a better position for us in regards to moving forward. Everyone says, well, it's only 2 years. I understand that it's only for 2 years, but what if someone's already been working on this for 6 months? And they're at a point where they are about to come forward. Can they hold on to their financing? Can they hold on to their project? Can they hold on to what they're doing for another 2 years? Or will they then take that investment out of Ashland and take it someplace else? I would ask that you consider changing this to 20 units or less.
Or more.
Or more, sorry, or more.
20 units or less would kind of defeat the purpose. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Joan Friday, One Shore Road. I feel strongly that Ashland is growing too fast. We need time to reset. This moratorium, as originally written, will give time to reassess the impact on the schools, water, sewer, and public services. I noticed in Michael's proposal that the water does appear to have come down, but we've been on a water ban for years. And I really think that that's probably had a big impact on it. Plus, a lot of people have done a lot of water conservation, toilets and et cetera. I think that it just doesn't make sense to me to allow 5 20-unit complexes a 100-unit complex. I don't see the difference, and I think that we're talking about the amount of people and the amount of units that will be added to Ashland. And the moratorium is only for 2 years. People can actually start the process during that time, but they can't start building. And I think we just need time to reset. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brittany Adams Ivancho, David's wife at 32 Warren Road. We moved here about a year ago. We've really enjoyed our time here and getting to know our neighbors. My hope is that...
Can I just stop you and say,
yes.
Thank you for being at town meeting, having only been in town for a year.
Oh, of course. Thank you guys for hosting. But to get to the point, it was really lucky that we found the housing that we did in Ashland. I really hope that more of our friends and even possibly our family move here, but that means that we need to keep building. I support the upgrade to at least the 20 units, but I would like to expand even beyond that. I really think that in this housing crisis that we have nationwide, we really need to look at any growth possible that we can create, and housing is where it begins. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Janet Platt, 11 Rodman Road. I want to speak against the 20 units or more. I live on the 126 corridor. Our neighborhood has smaller than average lots, and putting a smaller than 20 units, 16 units, say, for example, building shoehorned into my neighborhood would affect it as much as a larger unit elsewhere. So I think we deserve the same consideration for how we want our side of town to look and grow. I think we should be welcome to the table for part of that discussion as the rest of Ashland discusses this for our future. So I would encourage saying no for now. Let's decide where we want our growth to be, how we want it to look. We're going to have to do this. We will be growing. I know we will. But I think we all need to feel like we're not at odds with each other, but have a unified vision for what our town is going to be. Thanks.
Thank you, Janet. Paul?
Paul Kendall, 6 Rebennacker Road. First, just can I get a confirmation from Town Council that the moratorium does not prevent someone from applying and going through the process with the planning board and such? Is just on the back end, they're not allowed to be issued the permits. Is that
So you're asking me to ask town council, right?
Yes, please.
Thank you. That's what I thought. Council?
Right, well, again, Jay Tellerman, Town Council, the backstop is the building permit there. Also, given the life cycle of a special permit process, I suppose someone could go forward at their own peril, but the backstop is the building permit.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm against alternating this, and for a few reasons. One, the reasons we put up there for doing this is we need to better understand what it means to grow at all, right? So as Ms. Platt said, a 16-unit building was a big deal for that community over there, that neighborhood, right? So they're very impactful, even at that lower number. The other component of this is, it's not that we do it tonight and we're beholden to a date 2 years from now. We can come back in May. We can redact this whole thing. We can repeal it. We can modify it. We can do all these things. We have 2 opportunities every single year to do this. So let's take a pause. Let's get the information. And then if we want to come back with a motion and a warrant article next year to say, hey, now we have done some of this work, let's make it 12, let's make it 20, let's put a stipulation in there this way or that way. What I've heard, I've watched the select board meeting when they were deliberating, and it was spitballing. And it's nothing against it. They don't have the information. So let's do this smart. We have another bite at the apple, and let's leave it as is, please.
Thank you, Paul.
I oppose changing the recommendation of the town manager. I think we really need to reset. One of the items that you mentioned is that you saw some decrease in the usage of water. It's because, when it doesn't rain for 2 days, there is a water ban, and we are law-abiding citizens. When you do that, we don't use water, we conserve. But we cannot keep on doing that, I've been here in Massachusetts for 7 years now, and I can't water my lawn. But that is, just beautification. No? But we need to conserve the energy. The second one is that we have 2-lane roads around Ashland. And having 2-lane roads at the current period, it's already a pain in the bottom to get out of Ashland. So please, let's reset. It's only for 2 years, and we could always come back. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kendall.
Tricia Kendall, 6 Rubenacker Road. I am a member of the current planning board, but I'm speaking just as a resident, though I should say I'm speaking individually and not representing the board. We talked on the board, though, about the pluses and minuses of this, and there were arguments on both sides and valid arguments. But I guess from my 3.5 years on the planning board, which really isn't very much time, I really still feel like I'm just getting my feet wet there. But what I have come to realize is that these size of projects, which indeed look very small relative to the kinds of projects that are in front of planning board right now, they still do have a big impact on the community. So when you look at these, we have 12 Pond Street, and correct my numbers if I'm wrong, 12 Pond Street, which has 16 units, 128 Main Street, which has 14 units, 21 Pond Street, which is, I believe, just 9 units. And all of these buildings had huge impacts and were very important to the people that lived in those neighborhoods. And they came out to express that. And so I really feel like we need a plan, which is the comprehensive plan, to give us guidelines about how to do this wisely, how to do it the right way. I'm not against development. I'm certainly not against housing, but we have to do it carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna.
Anna Tesmanitsky, 4 Meeting House Path. I'll also speak individually, not on behalf of the planning board. And what I'll say is there are, I believe, 4 current projects before the planning board that will represent over 400 apartments that will in fact be built if those projects are approved in the next 2 years, regardless of the moratorium. So to respond to the concern that, hey, there's not going to be any housing over the next 2 years, that is actually inaccurate. The moratorium does not apply to projects already pending in front of the planning board, which does encompass, my math is over 400 apartments. And then the other thing is this moratorium does not in any way prevent commercial development. So we have 2 years when our community can in fact shift focus more towards commercial development. And there are other communities, including Natick, that are working to attract science development, other types of development in their communities, and that's an opportunity for us as a community as well to maybe just think a little bit outside the box for 2 years. And those are my last 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeSoni.
Okay, thank you. Mark Sony, for about 5th time. On one of the slides that you showed on why we need a moratorium, the last word was that the comprehensive plan might have a say in the reasons why moratorium would be good. What does the comprehensive plan have that involves this
Mark,
moratorium?
we're not talking, we closed discussion on the article itself.
But on the moratorium list.
We've closed discussion on the article itself. We're discussing only the substitute motion.
Only substitute motion?
Only the substitute motion.
Will the change of substitute motion change any of the article itself that's being presented? That's it.
Seeing no further discussion, we'll now vote on the substitute motion. The substitute motion requires a simple majority to pass. We'll start with a vote by cards. All those in favor of the substitute motion, please raise your cards. Thank you. Those opposed? The substitute motion fails. We'll move immediately to a vote on the main motion. This is a zoning article, will require a 2/3 majority. All those in favor of Article 7, please raise your cards. Thank you. And opposed? I declare a 2/3 majority. The article passes. There being no further business, I'll entertain a motion to dissolve. All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.